everybody. Welcome to DRTV, Above the Paygrade. I'm Jay Friesen.
And I'm Brian Matson.
And we are joined by a friend and a filmmaker and a great guy all around, Brian Ivie. Brian, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thank you guys. It's awesome to be here.
Brian, you've had a lot of success recently, and we congratulate you on it. You're sort of the toast of the town in Christian evangelical circles. Brian, you are the director of the movie The Dropbox, which you've had a lot of media interest in the last few weeks. How has that been for you?
It's been weird, you know. Jay always told me I'd be Christian famous one day. And it's a weird thing, you know. It's like the opposite of what you feel like you should be doing as a believer, is being known, right? So, just trying to not do any humble brags and trying to lift up God's name above mine as much as I can without making it seem forced, because I really do care more about that than my career. And if God wants me to go make calculators instead of make movies, I'll do that, you know. So, one step at a time, but it's been really fun, and I love how the film's impacted people.
That's great. Yeah, I remember seeing I met Brian a couple years ago at the San Antonio Christian Film Festival. He'd flown in late, and I hit him up on the website, and I was like, bro, I want to meet you. Your film looks amazing. It's called The Dropbox, and you know, the premise of the film is a South Korean pastor had a heart for unwanted babies and built this Dropbox for people to deposit their unwanted babies, and it's an incredible movie. And I remember you flew in, you were late, and we sat down. He's like, "How was the first screening?" I'm like, "Bro, it was a standing ovation. It was the place was packed out, and you weren't even there." He's like, "Oh, I know, man." You know. So we went out and had dinner, and it was really great to get to hear your heart, hear your story. And Brian's right. You're blowing up all over the blogosphere, all over the web. You just had a couple great screenings. What's been one of the most powerful things in the process of kind of, you know, you're now Christian famous. It's a joke, but you know, you're now Christian famous. What's been one of the most impactful things that people have said about your work in the film?
Great question. And first of all, I want to say that the reason why I'm on this program today is because of you, Jay, because you were the one who took me to dinner when I went to San Antonio for a festival. I'd never been to a film festival before, and certainly wasn't looking for any networking opportunities or anything like that at that point. But it was really more just I felt like I was meeting somebody who was real in a world of evangelical Christianity that I wasn't really sure about. I didn't know if people were going to be fake or try to, you know, woo me or something like that with my movie, but I didn't get that from you at all. So I support what you do, and it's an honor for me to be on your program. But
well, that was very kind.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
I would say recently I got a letter, which is actually right here. If you can see this, it's like, I won't obviously reveal everything, but it's like I got this letter the other day.
It's a nice long letter.
I know, and it's handwritten, and I've gotten a lot of these letters, but the letter was actually from a woman who had watched the film, and it felt like for a long time that God didn't really love her, and in fact she despised his love, and she really more rejected herself more than anything, and wrote me this long letter saying how the film really freed her from that and helped her feel loved for the first time in many years. And even having grown up in the church and hearing about Jesus and hearing about God and all these things she's supposed to believe, it really cut to her heart and finally set her free into a place where she could feel loved and accepted by the God who always has loved and accepted her. So that's been the coolest part.
That's a powerful story.
Wow.
So tell us, let's back up, all right? So we're assuming that everybody, Jay just kind of gave the premise of the movie, but let's back up. So how did this film come about?
Sure. Well, I read an article in the Los Angeles Times on June 20th, 2011. That article was called South Korean Pastor's Unwanted Flock. And it was all about this man in Korea who had built a mailbox, or at least looked to me like a mailbox for abandoned babies on his church.
Wow.
And I really wanted to find out more about that. I mean, obviously you would too, right?
Sure.
It's, you know, most people think Dropbox is just a file sharing website.
Yeah, course.
Right. But this box was for babies, and I was compelled immediately by it, kind of haunted by the idea. Started to chase down the story, sent an email to the LA Times, sent an email to Pastor Lee. A month later, I got an email back saying, in broken English back to me, clearly a Google translated email. And it said this: "Dear Brian, this is Pastor Lee. I don't know what it means to make a documentary film exactly, but you can come live with me if you want. And I responded, see you soon. And that was how it all started.
Wow.
So you were, I understand you were a film student at the time, right?
Yep, I was an aspiring Christopher Nolan, J.J. Abrams, and I never thought I would make a documentary film. It was the last thing on my mind.
Wow. And you were going to, this was originally slated to be a short film, right? You weren't planning to do a full-length feature, right?
That's right, yeah. I mean, the film was going to be a 10-minute short maximum. I had no interest in spending 3 years of my life working on a documentary about social issues in a country 6,000 miles away from me that I had no connection to, right?
Right.
And so when I set out to make the film, though, I mean, the goal was really to go to Sundance Film Festival. For me, the film was a stepping stone. But on a really personal level, when I grew up, I've wanted to make movies since I was 9 years old, and I always used to make movies about battles, Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter, good versus evil. And when I saw this man, I saw a man who was in a battle, but he was also in a neighborhood that was a place that I understood because I lived in a neighborhood, and I wanted to join the battle as well and kind of get out of the bubble that I was in America, in Orange County. So it was sort of the idea of adventure, and also this idea that it could take me somewhere in my own career that led me to South Korea in December of 2011.
Wow. Now, people can probably find this elsewhere on the web, that you became a Christian during the film, and then subsequently a lot of your family became a Christian. And I want to, and that story is out there, and so I encourage you to go check out his story in some other interviews. Let's fast forward a little bit to your growth since you become a Christian, and you've been
Sure.
You kind of went from no experience to evangelicalism to I am a Christian celebrity. Great. This is, what have you been learning in this journey and in this process? Where have you kind of been finding your faith impacting in a more real capacity?
Yeah, and what are the challenges?
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's a good question, because at some point I knew that people would get over this whole story of me becoming a Christian while making a movie, although it is a great story. But I'm happy you asked that, because I'd rather talk about that, because that's where I'm living now.
Right.
I've been a Christian for 3 years, and I've been walking in sonship to the best of my ability. I think it's really easy to think that your identity is a filmmaker, even though it's not true, and you can read the Bible and all these things. But I really have to make sure that it doesn't become that, because that's what it was for me. Movies were my life. They were everything. They were my functional God before I went to South Korea and made this film. But what I've been learning a lot about is that I think everybody has an authenticity meter, and anybody I talk to is looking to see that I'm real, and that I'm in some way like the God that I proclaim,
right.
Which is not a burden you have to bear, but I think there's something about God's love that makes you lovely, and I want people to see the proof of God in the way I treat people, the proof of God in the way that I am, because I'm not the man I used to be. And that's why I talk about my porn addiction and my abusive patterns and my anger issues and all this stuff that used to be a part of my life, and it isn't anymore at all. And I say that because I want people to understand that God actually breaks chains, sets you free in a tangible way, not just in a theoretical spiritual sense. And although there is a spiritual reality to that, there's also this physical reality of I am more free than I've ever been. And in that freedom, I have a choice to either just enjoy life for myself or give it on behalf of others that are suffering. And so that's a lot of what I've been learning about what people need to hear about Christianity, and just not being a car salesman,
right.
Just heart to heart, telling people what I went through, and that I was a kid who, my greatest mistake in life was thinking I didn't need God's forgiveness, that I was too good to need God's forgiveness. And everywhere I go, I have this song for the suburbs. I just tell people, look, I didn't almost overdose. I didn't run a Mexican cartel, but I needed to be forgiven. But that forgiveness was always the road home to the place my soul was always meant to be. So
wow, that's great. And of course, doing this film, you had such a wonderful example of somebody who the love of God was obviously had impacted him so much, as Pastor Lee, that he is taking in the unlovable, the unwanteds of South Korea. You became a Christian during the filming of this movie. What role did his story, Pastor Lee, play in your conversion?
Well, I think he kind of broke down this this misconception that I had about Christians, because the media makes Christians seem like, well, bigots and, holier than thou, perfect people who are putting on this show. And in reality, Christians aren't the perfect people. They're the people who know they're not even good.
Right.
That's why we talk about being saved from something, because we need help. Goodness gracious. So when I met this pastor and he talked about his history of alcoholism and abuse and how he was a terrible father and how he was a skirt chaser and just a messed up dude, like a messed up dude, I of course, started seeing parallels. I was like, so first of all, he was messed up. He never had any interest in caring for children until God got in his life, rescued him. So he was not a natural born hero, right? That's what I like to say. It's like Pastor Lee was saved before he saved anyone else, right?
Right.
And so when I saw that about Christians in general, then I realized there was something real about them that made my life seem fake, because I was hiding a lot of my stuff, a lot of my junk. And Pastor Lee was somebody who was not afraid to be known. And that's what Christians are. It's like, they're like little kids who are, well, not all the time, but it's like you're not even capable of leading a double life, because you're accepted and you're known all the way through. So why, you have nothing to hide.
Wow, that's great stuff. So, okay. So I wanted to ask you about this. So when you set off to South Korea to make one film, and it turned into something completely different. I've heard interviews with you, and you wanted to do some kind of a social interest film about the kind of idolatry of perfection in South Korean culture, and this man is battling kind of this social ill. And it seems like when you got there, you steadily discovered that there's a much deeper spiritual reality going on here, that this man's doing what he's doing because of the gospel. Tell us about that.
Yeah. The first trip, I was really there to tell my Sundance story. It was all about a man who would take in children who were unwanted in a world that threw them away. It was this, I pitted him against the culture. And that's an interesting story. I mean, don't get me wrong, but it was not at all the story he would tell. So when I came back from South Korea, he looked really uncomfortable in all the interviews because he was being asked all the wrong questions, And so when I went back to South Korea, after I became a Christian and understood what motivated Pastor Lee to do what he did, I just said, Pastor Lee, what do you want to talk about? And all he wanted to talk about is how God rescued him and gave him a heart to rescue other people, and how Pastor Lee's own son, his only biological son, Man, who has lived 29 years on his back, was not cursed, but actually blessed by God to give Pastor Lee the heart to care for the vulnerable. And so this whole world of God's sovereignty and purpose and meaning to life really started opening up for me. And what's cool is that when people watch the film, they go, I really like how this man loves people. And my response is, of course you do, because you were made for it.
Right.
We were all made for that kind of love. It's not the weak at the knees Hollywood love that's going to save you. It's going to be the sacrificial, freedom-purchasing, justifying love of God. And that's shown and displayed in Pastor Lee's life. And I had to experience it first in order to capture it for the rest of the world.
That's such a great story. Now you mentioned that you went in and you came back and you changed the questions you asked him. There seems to be kind of a tie-in there between being a Christian and being a filmmaker, something that whereas Christians, we apply a certain ethic in telling not just the great story or trying to refabricate some sort of story, but creating a story that's ethical, that's accurate, and that's true, that's still also very engaging. What are some of the other, how has your faith impacted your filmmaking from that point, kind of to now and moving forward?
Yeah, how has my faith well, it's a good question, because I think there's something about being good at filmmaking, I think, or at least being masterful at it, a lot of times requires like complete idolatry to it. It is such a hard thing to master because it is all 7 arts combined. You know, you have to, as a director at least, you have to be good at a lot of things. You can't just be someone who practices the violin all day 5 hours a day and you master it. You got to know how to play the bassoon and the oboe and the violin and the bass, and, you know, and the drums and everything else. And so for me, you know, being a conductor is a hard thing to accomplish because now movies aren't the most important thing in my life. So when it comes down to it, I'm going to choose my fiance over preparing for this music video. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So there is something that impacts it practically that, like, I think that's why a lot of Christians, when you see a lot of these films out there, they're just not as well made because a lot of these people, really, that's not what they prioritize in their life. It's just one thing that they do.
That's an interesting
but
perspective.
At the same time,
I hadn't thought of that. I hadn't thought of that at all. That maybe these people don't worship filmmaking, and that's why
it's not going to be as good.
Yeah, interesting. Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
And that's hard. No. It's something I've noticed because as once I became a Christian, like, you know, I have a case full of, you know, 700 movie DVDs in here in my office, but I just don't watch as many movies anymore because I'm just not spending my time doing that. I'm usually out with people, trying to help people, love people, because I have a new desire for that because I never wanted to help anyone before I became a Christian.
Wow.
You know, so there is this idea that I think there's this tension in a lot of Christians that are filmmakers to be like, how do I prioritize my time trying to master this when there's the things that are bigger and more important in this life? But what it has helped me do, actually, which I think is very important in a documentary sense, is my relationships with people are way better. So when I went back to Korea to make the second film, quote unquote, you know, the new film that was really more about God than about the story I wanted to tell, I let people tell their story. I asked them what they wanted to say. And the film got a lot better. And if I could do it all over again, I would just focus on getting the best out of my crew and the best out of the people on camera and call it a day. And and so it has given me a better sense of leadership, of honor, of responsibility. And so there is this, right? And so there is this tension. There are a lot of good things that come out of that, but I do think it makes it a lot harder to become this perfect artist that I always wanted to be. And the problem is I'm okay with that because it's not the point of my life.
Interesting.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it sounds almost like your faith has freed you from being a control freak. Like trying to fabricate or make the story what you want it to be, and
that nobody likes to work with.
Yeah, that no one likes to work with.
Kind of a quintessential director.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's allowed you to sort of humble yourself, I guess, and put you know, getting the best out of other people is what does Paul say is consider others better than yourself, right?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
yeah, interesting. Wow.
You know, there is that balance, and I know we feel it here at Dead Reckoning as well, and you feel it with the Dropbox and with your organization Kindred Image, and the tension of we need to be excellent at what we do and spend a lot of time honing our craft and being excellent because God calls us to be excellent on account of Him, not on account of us.
Sure.
But still
for
understanding
sure.
the priority, where it lands in the scope of the world. You know, it's that balance of building your platform, building your awareness, but yet we're somehow kind of building our platform, but we're trying to use our platform they're building to point to God, and then we're kind of relying on Him to build our platform. And it's difficult. It's a lot more difficult as a Christian, I think, to do this sort of work than
not.
Yeah.
Oh, that's an interesting thought. I had thought
For
about
sure.
that. So as the director of this film, The Dropbox, I want to get your bottom line. What do you want the audience to take away from this story? What do you want them to feel? What do you want them to conclude when the final credits roll?
So my heart is broken all over this movie. And I think that's why it's good. It's because I think the audience can tell when the director doesn't go there emotionally with his own film, you know?
Right.
And I obviously did. I went to the edge and then, jumped off. And so I think people can sense that there's a broken heart all over this movie. But what I really want for them is that I want them to experience what I did when I visited that house and met this man who was living proof of a loving God. You know, I want them to experience the love that they were made for. So that's my bottom line, is I want this to be an earth-shattering experience for people where they can go, so this is what Christian faith is. This is what it looks like to be loved. Look at what being loved looks like in the world. It looks like somebody who is full, giving everything for others. It looks like someone who is accepted, you know, being honest about their life and everything they go through. It looks like someone who is so loved that they can love people in a way that is astounding, that is head-turning, that is mind-boggling. And so, you know, I hope that people see that that's really what God does in somebody's life, and that we should expect big things when the Holy Spirit, right, gets into your life.
Sure.
And so I don't want any more of this. Every time we hear about Christians in the media, they've either cheated on their spouse or they've embezzled money. This is all I hear about Christianity. It's all a joke. You know, nobody really believes this. Everybody's seriously doubting everything in their heart. It doesn't really change you. And that's a bunch of BS to me, because it's the only thing that's set me free. It's the only thing that's really shown me what life is about. And I want people to see a picture of this and show, not tell and force it down people's throats, but show them what it looks like when the love of God shows up. So that's my bottom line.
That's great. Wow.
That's fantastic. So now that you've had the theatrical release and you've got it out there, where's it going to show up next, and how can everybody get a copy?
Yes. How can we watch it?
Sure. So it's been out in theaters, which is great. We had a great run. We sold about 270,000 tickets across North America. People loved the movie. There have been great responses everywhere we went. But now there are two ways to see the film. Number one, churches can get a hold of the film after April 17th. So you can already sign up. You can get information about it by going to the Dropboxfilm.com. And churches can get a hold of this movie to show screenings of it, invite me to come and speak, share my testimony, that kind of thing. And that's, you know, from April 17th on. And then the DVD will drop on July 7th, but you can also go to the Dropboxfilm.com to pre-order and to make sure you get your copy on time. And I would encourage people to hand this DVD to people, because it represents what we believe. And it's not something you have to be embarrassed about sharing, because it's not offensive and doesn't have all this language of Christianese, but it shows the gospel. And my hope is that people would share it.
That's great.
That is fantastic. So cool. Well, Brian, it's been so great to have you on the show with us today. Really appreciate it. I love hearing you talk. I love hearing your heart and hearing about your passion. And, you know, I remember seeing you get the Best of Show award, you know, at the San Antonio Festival. I'm like nudging you. You're like, no. I'm like, bro, you walked away with this, and you're just like, you're up there, and you were just sharing your testimony and thanking God for His grace to you and through the film. And that's just, it's so great to hear that. And I really do hope that you go out. Everyone watching this goes out and gets their copy, thedropboxfilm.com. Go out and get your copy, order one for your church, host a screening, you know, host one big screening. Grab that indie art house theater, go grab the movie, grab the theater, and then book it, and then just spread it to all the other churches. Tell them to
okay, I got two really quick things. I'm going to hopefully get this out of him. So, Brian, what's your next big project?
Ooh.
Sure. So I'm working on a feature film, narrative feature, scripted film called The Jesus Revolution. And it is about the last great awakening in America during the 60s and 70s, when a bunch of hippies high on LSD started, they found another way. So
the Jesus Movement movie.
The Jesus Movement.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So that's what I'm doing now, and I'm in a development phase writing that script, and then hopefully we'll make it if the wheels don't come off this year. So we'll see. But at the same time, I'm getting married in June, so that's really my next big project.
Fantastic.
That's awesome.
Congratulations,
man. That's so great.
Thank
Well, to follow us, to follow Brian again, the Dropboxfilm.com. To follow us at Dead Reckoning, www.deadreckoning.tv. Like us, follow us, share us with your friends. Tell everybody about us. Tell everybody about Brian Ivie and the Dropbox. And you can follow me on Twitter, Jay Friesen, Jayfriesen.
I'm at Brian G. Mattson, Mattson.
He's got a great blog, too. A lot of theology on that blog if you're into that sort of thing. So with that, I'm Jay Friesen.
I'm Brian Mattson.
And this is DRTV.